All right, I should be live, and hopefully, I've been having issues with my camera lately because the image has been disconnected and it's been kind of slow, and I don't know why. But so I'm working with different configurations to see if it can keep up, so I don't have that lagging image. So I know I don't have it when I do this. I know everything's fine when I minimize on it. So maybe it's costing too much computer power for some strange reason. So I don't know. So I'm going to be flipping a little bit, but we should be good. Let me go live on Instagram. Okay, there we go. Good. So now I'm live in all the places that I need to be. Okay. So, what this is and what we're going to talk about today is the day after the Fantastic Four. The day after the Fantastic Four. Now, see, I'm already lagging. I don't like it. Maybe that's a little bit better. Okay. So, yeah. So, first thing I want to say is that I am going to do a formal review. I'm actually going to make video. It's not going to be a live stream, but I'm going to do a formal review because there are lots of different things I want to talk about. There are lots of different things I want to say because there's a lot to process in this particular film, and it's a lots of process for a lot of different reasons. Okay. Now, what I've discovered is that some people thought I was going to hate it. And some people wanted me to hate it. They wanted me to go into it, hated it. But I told you I was going to go into it to look at it, see what it was, to see what it was. And so my live stream today and my review, when I do, is going to be based on that, what I thought this movie actually was. So the first thing I have to tell you about this is that I've heard the comment made that this was a comic book come to life. I'd have to agree. I'd have to agree that this was, if you're going to take a comic and try to do it with live action actors, but also, I'll take it a step further, it is an animated cartoon done with live actors. Okay, so let me repeat. This movie is a comic book come to life, true, but it's also like a Saturday morning animated cartoon, except done with live actors. If you understand that and accept that going in, then the movie will make more sense to you. You can get some kind of enjoyment out of it. So I'm not. Hey, what's up, Kenny? It's good to see you. I see you in the chat. Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your coffee cheers. So this is not. See, I know the difference between something being bad and just not what I wouldn't have done, because I'm objective enough to understand those two are not synonymous. Because nowadays we got people running around thinking that because I liked it is a defense or an argument. That's not a defense or an argument. But I liked it is not a defense or an argument. So I'm objective enough to understand that me not liking something or me it not being what I would have done is not synonymous with it being bad. That's not what I'm saying. Because that doesn't mean it's bad just because it's not what I would have done or whatever. So this is not necessarily a good book to screen adaptation. This is more Disneyfied. And this is, again, the approach was if it were a comic book. So if the adventure that happens in this movie was a comic book, what would that look like with real live actors? That's what this film is. So if you go in accepting that, and if you go in understanding that, then you can understand what the movie is and you can enjoy it for what it is. But if you're looking for a completely accurate book to screen translation, especially especially their earliest adventures. This movie is set early on, but it tries to get away with too many things. And if you heard me say that before, this movie is set in the 60s, but not our 60s. So it's 60-esque. The first screen tells you that it's Earth, I think it's 828. So it's a different Earth. So they're trying to borrow some things from our 60s. And then they're trying to also use a futuristic Jetsons kind of aesthetic and blend the two. But this movie is based on them being 3 to 4 years. I forgot what it is. I think it's 3 years. But it's 3 to 4 years into their career. So that being the case, if the movie is based on their early adventures, the Kirby and Lee run from the comics, that's not what this is at all. They mention it and they wink it, to give you quick, a few quick winks and a few shout outs and a few things that you will recognize from that. But that's not what this film is. It's an adventure that they wrote up that they could have easily made into an animated Saturday morning cartoon. It has all the strengths and weaknesses of that frame. So on a Saturday morning cartoon, not necessarily a lot of time for characterization, and not necessarily a lot of time for emotional moments, although we do have some, but all the emotional moments come at the end. The most emotional moments in this film come at the end of the film. So again, you have to understand the frame that this movie is written from and presented from. And it's trying to do a lot at once. So some stuff it pulls off well, some stuff it doesn't. What it pulls off the best is the sense of it being an adventure. What it doesn't pull off well is giving you a reason to care about the characters and giving you an ability to know who they are if you don't already know them until the end. Like I said, the most emotional moments in the film come at the end. Now, when I do my reviews, I do full spoilers. So if I'm going to talk about a movie, I'm going to talk about a movie. Okay? So the most emotional moments come at the end. But there's not a lot to hook you into these characters if you don't already know who they are. That's the main difference between the Fantastic Four and Superman, because that's been the debate all year, is how well are those two movies going to do, because they're such major films from both studios. But the Fantastic Four don't have, and probably never have had, the same type of worldwide name recognition as Superman. So there's so much in here that are winks to people that already know the group. So again, it's a unique adventure written like it was a comic book or written like it was an animated feature that they did with live action actors. So you got to understand that going in. Okay. So having said that, you have to get past the casting, because the funniest thing about Pedro Pascal is that he's really not bad in this film. There aren't really a lot of Pascalisms, if you will. He's more kind of shooting himself in the foot with his off-screen antics. It's more the way he behaves off-screen that, will kind of throw a monkey in the wrench. So that's more of like a Zegler style thing. The stuff that you say in interviews and the stuff that you do around the promotion of the film. Pascal is more like that. When he's being himself in interviews and being himself on camera and all that, he's done so much that is just so off-putting. With him as Reed in the movie, if you accept him as Reed, it's still a Disney-fied version of Reed. It's not actual Reed, but he's not bad in the film. The version of Reed that we see in the film is more of a caricature of Reed Richards. It's not really the Reed we know or the Reed we would expect. It's more someone that doesn't really know him or doesn't really like him or a whole bunch of things. And so it's more of a character. They keep saying that this movie wasn't woke, and that's not true. It's just not woke in the ways you think of it. The ways you think of woke is swapping white characters for black, swapping male characters, particularly white male characters, for women and bashing men at every turn. Well, this movie doesn't do that in a blatant, obvious, hit you over the head kind of way, but it does do it with the level of Reed's competence and sometimes incompetence. So like I said, if you buy Pascal, see, I'm slowing down again. I got to figure out what's wrong with my camera. So if you buy Pascal as Reed, if you accept that and you get past that, he's really not that bad in this film. It's more his off movie camera antics and promotion of the film, but it's really not bad. But this version of him is still very much emasculated. This version of him is still very much not a good book to screen translation, especially since they were going for the early. See, now, if you want the definitive Fantastic Four, you have to read the first 100 issues by Lee and Kirby. Just go all the way back to the beginning. Start with number 1. Okay, I'm going to get to your comments. I see your comments. So we're going to do that at the end like I normally do. But I do see your comments, and so I'm gonna put them on the screen. So thank everybody for watching. Keep your comments coming. I'm going to deal with them at the end. But it's still not, especially not the Reed in the early years. That's what I mean when I say they're trying to have it both ways. They're trying to be in the 60s on some aspects, because the true vibe of the 60s was more women were seen, not heard, which is the basis of Sue and her powers. And the true vibe of the 60s was where men were a lot more, I guess, what we consider being more of a jerk or more assertive or just more masculine as far as I'm concerned. This Reed is not that. This Reed is very apologetic. And this Reed is relatively unsure of himself. Sometimes he's sure, sometimes he's not, and so there's that. So like I said, if you can get past that, Pascal is not bad if you accept all the things I just said. But it's not the early Reed. It's not the Reed from the comics, especially in the early run. In terms of Sue, there was a lot of talk, even by Vanessa Kirby herself, that this was going to be a girl boss kind of thing. Not really. Sue is definitely prominent in this film. She is definitely prominent in this film, but not to the point of it being so girl bossy. It's not a Captain Marvel kind of vibe. It's not Carol Danvers. It's not that. See what I mean? So I know there was a lot of talk of that, and she even talked about it, but it really is toned down enough to where they presented her as part of the team. A significant part of the team, because the core plot point is the fact that she's pregnant with Franklin. So the core plot point is that Galactus wants Franklin because Galactus senses the power cosmic in the child before the child is even born. And Galactus sees Franklin as his way out of no longer having to deal with the hunger that Franklin can either create worlds for Galactus to feed off of, or Franklin can replace Galactus as the world eater. So the core of this plot is that Galactus senses the power cosmic inside of Sue's unborn child. That therefore puts Sue center stage, since she obviously is the one that's going to bear the child. But it's not girl boss in the sense of what we're used to, like Kate Bishop being better than Hawkeye in every way, or Echo or Ironheart, or trying to bash the male characters or trying to replace them. It's not that. But she is very much front and center. But it's not in an obnoxious kind of way to where you can't get through the film. So that's just not true. But it's also not early Sue from the comics. For those of you that read the comics, you know that Sue did not get her force fields right away. All Sue got was the ability to turn invisible herself. and she did it as kind of a reactionary type of thing. But I'm going way back to the early comics. I'm talking about their origin in the 60s. She didn't get her force fields until later. When she gets her force fields is when she becomes more powerful, and she gets an offensive weapon instead of just a defensive weapon. And the most unsung power that the Invisible Woman has is to turn other things invisible. That power is front and center in this movie. She uses that power more in this movie than she has in any other live action outing. But the level of power that Sue has, the level of power that all of them has, is not their first 3 years. So once again, what they're doing is same thing Superman did, is they're pulling from different eras to try to make this work, because this is not the level of power development that the group had in their early stages. This is them way mature in their powers, way mature in their powers. And that's a significant plot point based on what happens in the film. So again, it's not going to be the first 100 issues of FF from the comics. It's an amalgam, if you will. Okay, when it comes to Johnny, Johnny's pretty much Johnny, but he's Johnny. He's not early Johnny. He's Johnny that's mastered his powers. And that's significant several times in the film. Also, one of the things that I did like about the film that we haven't really seen that much in live action is them working together as a team, both with and without their powers. Because there's several scenes where, like where they're in the ship, where they each have jobs to do in terms of what's happening and navigation with the ship and defense and all different kind of stuff. And this was the first time we really kind of solidified the four of them working together as a team, trying to solve a problem that wasn't necessarily powers related, that was more logistical, more having to do with them being astronauts or cosmonauts, more accurately, or explorers. That's another nod in this movie that was really well done, showing the four of them functioning in a cosmic situation as pilots and as science people and as explorers. So that was done really well. That was done really well. So Johnny is pretty much Johnny. That thing about him not being a womanizer, not being cocky, all that is not really true. But once again, it's just peppered in. It doesn't hit you over the head. He's not like a subdued Johnny. He's not like, you know, a simp like we thought, but it's not heavy-handed either way. So they pepper in moments of kind of the brash, quick-tempered, cocky, flirty Johnny Storm, but they don't beat you over the head with it like we thought was going to happen, because normally that's what woke stuff does. Whatever message they have, they beat you over the head with it. But that's not what this movie does. Finally, the worst translation is Ben, which is going to be disappointing for a lot of people. So let me just tell you that up front. Ben in this movie is so subdued, you have to wonder. And I see your comments. I'm going to address your comments, so keep them coming. I appreciate your comments. I see your comments, so keep them coming. I'm going to put them on the screen at the end like I always do in my live streams, but I am going to address them. Ben is so subdued in this movie until it's not the Ben that you know. It's really not to the point where it's kind of off-putting. I know that Ben is a gentle giant, but Ben has other sides to him. He has that Bronx accent. He has that New York side to him. He has that rough street side. He has that college football side. Ben has another side to him. If you read the first comic, Ben was the one that was telling Reed they shouldn't go into space, warning Reed about the cosmic rays. Sue called him a coward, and Ben lost his temper, and he couldn't believe that Sue called him a coward. And he busted up the table. But he's not that guy in this movie. Okay, his aggressive tendencies are so toned down. And even his clobbering time stuff or whatever, Johnny's got to make him say whatever, but I'm saying this Ben is more subdued, much more toned down. He's not the ever-loving blue-eyed thing that you know from the comics. That was the most disappointing to me personally. So I know it's going to be fine for a lot of people, but to me personally, that was the most disappointing part. He's not that Ben. He's almost kind of a nanny. He spends more time with the energy vibe of a nanny than he does of being the thing. And also what this movie does, this movie completely skips past his struggle with being an Orange Rock monster. So that's another thing that the movie does when it starts you years into their career. Now, I know people say they don't want origin movies, and I know people say they're tired of origin stories, and I know they say we don't have to keep rehashing that. I get that. But one of the things that you lose is how moody and glum and bitter and angry Ben Grimm was when he first turned into the thing, because he obviously was the only one of the four that could no longer pass for human. He obviously had his life irrevocably changed, you know. And yes, Eric is talking about how Johnny didn't say flame on. That's too. That's correct too. So Ben does have his classic line, his catchphrase, but it's forced. And Johnny does not have his. I don't believe. I have to go back and watch it again. Now that's a difference between this and Superman, because I'm never watching Superman again. You can forget that, because I despise that film with the passion of 1,000 suns. I can't make you understand the level to which I despise that Superman movie. But this I will watch again. This I probably am going to watch again, because there's more details I need to review. But so like I said, Ben is much more, his vibe is much more the gentle giant, but mainly that. Almost a nanny kind of thing, but it's not the thing we would expect. Okay. And so yeah. So and then there's the most controversial character. And the funniest thing is that both the villains in the movie are at the extreme. Both villains are at the extreme. So we'll start with Silver Surfette or Silver Surf Her, or whatever your favorite pet name is for her. Oh my God, I can't take her seriously. I've heard several comments. I've heard several people say to me that the fact that she's a woman and they cut out Norman Rad in his story means they're not going to watch this film. And I completely understand, because she cannot be taken seriously. First of all, the CGI is bad. The CGI looks about like it looked in Terminator 2 back in the early 90s when we first meet the T-1000. But the way the T-1000 talks is more robotic, but that works because T-1000 is a robot or a cyborg or cybernetic organism. And so the way his mouth moves makes sense for the character. So if you think about when we first see the liquid metal Terminator back in Terminator 2, back early 90s, that's about what this is, because she looks funny. Her eyes look funny, her hair looks funny, her mouth looks funny when she talks. And it's just, but you can't take her seriously. She's trying to be menacing throughout the film. She's trying to present a threat. She's trying to, but there is no gravitas to this chick. I'm sorry, there just isn't. That she's funny, but I don't mean funny comic relief, because it's not that at all. It's funny, like funny that you think you're intimidating. Haven't you ever squared off against someone and they think they're all big and bad? They think they're all hot stuff. They think they're all whatever. And you're looking at them like, really? Really? I could take you with my weak hand. If I'm right-handed, I could take you with my left hand. And dude, get out my face. Get out my face with a quickness. That's this. So that's the greatest girl boss element to the film, is how they keep thinking that this Silver Surfer is going to work. She doesn't work at all for me. And for a lot of people are so off put by her presence that they don't want to see the film, and I totally understand. After having seen the film, even when she's surfing, everything she does just looks funny to me. It just looks funny to me. So it's like, Blue Crush in space. It just looks funny to me. You can't take her seriously. I couldn't take her seriously. Not one scene in the movie. And also, now, pay attention to what I'm saying. Her voice is just not intimidating. I'll give you an example of where that works. Hela in Thor, what was that, Ragnarok? Hela, when she speaks, there's some weight, because Kate Blanchett is an incredible actress, but there's some weight when Hela speaks, or Hela, however you say it, but I've always called her Hela. When she speaks, there's some weight there, there's some gravitas there, and you kind of take what she's saying a little bit more seriously. There is none of that when this little silver girl speaks, because that's what she looks like. She looks like some chick in high school that's trying a new fad, and she thinks she's all that, and she thinks she's all cutting edge, and oh Lord, I'm lagging again. And she thinks she's all, she's looking for Regina George because she's trying to get an entry into the plastics because she's cool, like the cool girls. No. Just shut all the way up is what I kept saying every time she talked, because you're not intimidating. There's nothing about your presence or your voice or your presentation that's intimidating. Okay? Now, I will admit that most of the time you see her in the film, she is unstoppable. They have to kind of trick her. They use a trick. They kind of use some science stuff to stop her, but she's pretty much unstoppable in the film. She just keeps coming, because there's a scene where they're running away and they can't stop her. So there's that, but she still ain't intimidating. And she still sounds really funny when she talks. Now you contrast that to Galactus, and Galactus is pitch perfect. I mean, Galactus is pretty much a 10 out of 10. For me to give something a 10 out of 10, that means I couldn't think of any way it could be improved. I really can't think. They scaled him so well. He's like Godzilla size. A little bit bigger in some scenes, a little bit smaller in some scenes. But when you see him walking through the city, when you see the scale of him, you can't really see the scale of him when he's in the ship. He's huge and he looks intimidating. But in terms of scale, when he comes to Earth, he's about in the Godzilla range, and it looks believable. But his eyes are great. His eyes are great. Those eyes, the way they flare when he's about to do something or when he's about to call on the power or whatever, they're great. His voice, but not just his voice, his speaking pattern. His speaking pattern, when Galactus speaks, he sounds like someone that's been around for billions of years. He sounds like someone that's weighty, that knows what they're talking about. He sounds like you would expect Galactus to sound. Ben does not sound like what you expect Ben Grimm to sound like. The gruff voice, the Bronx accent, the kind of being rough around the edges is not what this Ben sounds like at all. But Galactus sounds exactly like you would expect Galactus to sound if he were real. So out of all the translations that they did, because there are other characters in here too, out of all the translations that they did from the comics, Galactus is spot on. He is most definitely the highlight of this film. If you know anything about him and you know anything about him from the comics, this is the guy you were expecting. He's the only one of the characters I can say that about 100%. 100%. This Galactus is the guy that you were expecting in terms of presence and look sound and presentation. We're going to talk about his motivation in a minute. Yeah, but in terms of book to screen translation, then yeah, they couldn't have done it any better. Okay, so now in terms of the plot, like I told you, the plot is the only kind of place where Galactus kind of fails as a character is that him wanting a successor or him being tired or him, but it's just that it didn't, the part that didn't bother me was because I like characters where their powers are somewhat of a curse. Every character didn't have to be that way. Like that ain't supposed to be Superman. So don't bring that noise to me. But the Thing, Metamorpho, the Hulk, their powers are just as much of a burden, as they are a blessing or a benefit. I like characters like that. All characters don't have to be that way, because that's most of the X-Men, where their powers are like Rogue. Rogue is like that, to where her powers are most definitely a curse and a burden. So the part of Galactus that they present here has him weighed down from the all-consuming nature of his hunger. And I know a lot of people didn't like that, but I did. I very much like, this is a being that's billions of years old that is tired of having to be hungry all the time. Can you imagine just being hungry all the time? I think I'm lagging again, but anyway, can you imagine just being hungry all the time, that all you do, you got to consume entire planets and star systems because you're so hungry? So I know that bothers some people, but it did not bother me. I understood it. It gave him a weight and a dimension to where, because Galactus has never been evil. Galactus is, we are to Galactus kind of like maybe ants are to us. We're not evil in that sense, and ants aren't evil. We can crush them, and when we kill animals and we eat them and all that. It's been more like that because he's not necessarily evil now. In certain incarnations and iterations, different things have changed, but I'm talking about conceptually, as a character, Galactus is not necessarily evil. He's just a being on a different level. And the way they present him here is that his hunger is all consuming. It's not regular hunger like we might feel. It's all consuming. And after billions of years of being that way, it seems that he's no longer good with that. Okay? So I know some people don't like it, but I'm saying it didn't bother me. Everything about Silver Surfer bothers me. She's just a joke. Sorry. If you like her, that's cool. And in terms of her relationship with Johnny, her relationship between her and Johnny, there's some flirting and there's some hinting. There's a whole bunch of stuff, but doesn't really go anywhere, and it really shouldn't, because it doesn't make any sense. And so, like I said, also the movie happens over time because Sue does have Franklin in the film. And like I said, that's the key point of the movie. So the name of this movie is wrong. The name of this movie should not be Fantastic Four First Steps. So even if that's a wink towards Franklin, that the name of this movie should be Galactus versus the Fantastic Four, because that's what this is. That's what this movie is from the jump, is Galactus versus the Fantastic Four. Now, one of the things that I didn't like, it leans too heavily into them being famous and celebrities, and there's so many scenes of people cheering for them. I'm like, would you give it a rest? That got on my nerves too. So they lean too heavily, for my taste, into the aspect of them being so loved and so cheered and so whatever. And then they did just like Superman did. Something comes out about Superman, and all of a sudden all these people turn on him. And so the Fantastic Four look like they may have failed, or basically what happens in the movie, spoiler alert, I told you I don't do spoiler-free reviews. What happens in the movie is, once Galactus discovers who Franklin is and the power Franklin has, he says he will spare their world if they give him Franklin. And Sue says no. And Reed says, no, you can't have our child. But stupid Reed, I told you he's not smart. He's kind of nerdy, but not. He doesn't have any kind of awareness. He gets on the mic and tells people that. And then people just turn on him because they're like, basically what people say is that you should have sacrificed your child to save us. Basically what people say, not necessarily directly, but their reaction is, what's the life of one child versus the life of everybody on earth? So if I were Reed, if that was the case, I wouldn't have said that. But he got up there and just laid it on out there. And then people kind of turn on him. But then later on, they're cheering again because they're heroes again. And so Superman did that same thing, the Superman movie. So, I mean, they lean too heavily into it as far as I'm concerned. They lean much too heavily into them being public figures and heroes. And everybody's just, go Fantastic Four, we love you, Johnny, we love you, Ben. And that's just over and over and over. And I'm like, okay, would y'all give that a rest, please? Okay. So like I said, I want to do a more formal review because I want to go back and hit all the details because there are a lot of details in this movie to hit. And especially the climax, especially the big finish, the big ending, because the most significant things happen in the end. And the things that the whole movie turns on happens in the last reel. Okay? So no. The other thing is that they do have other characters in this movie, and they're in it so briefly. Mole Man is in this movie. He gets the most screen time out of all the other characters, but Red Ghost actually is in this movie. But like they said, they cut out his scenes, which was a shame. I know they had to cut down the runtime, but they should have left Malkovich in this movie. So what we see is one quick glimpse of them fighting one of the apes. They mention Red Ghost, but he's not here. And that is ridiculous. And, so that was there. And then they mentioned the Mad Thinker and all that. But see, all that goes by in the beginning of the film, and it's all very, very briefly. So they do show you the scene, just like in the Pizza Little Caesars commercial. And like on the front cover of the first Fantastic Four magazine, they do show you that scene where the Mole Man's monster is coming up and they fight him. They do show you that. It's brief, but it is there. So like I said, a lot of winks. And then there's a cameo from the original Fantastic Four, the Corman movie that wasn't released back in '94, but it did kind of get released later. Just kind of a low-key release because we did see it. So obviously it got out some kind of way. So I'm saying all that is in there, but it goes by kind of fast. I really wish they had left Malkovich in this movie. I really do, because he's great. I've always liked him and everything I've seen him in. So by the time we get to movies in, that's when the stakes are the highest. That's when the emotions are the highest. And that's when you get the biggest payoff of the plot threads that they have set up. Some of them, however, are not resolved. And that's where it falls back into, remember I told you, it has all the strengths of being an animated movie, but it also has all the weaknesses. Because in an animated film or in a comic, the stuff that happens, it turns on a dime. Okay? And then there's the final scene. Now, there are 2 post-credit scenes. So when I do my main review, I will spoil them, but there are 2 post-credit scenes. The first one was spoiled for me on Twitter because some genius put it out there. I did not believe that it was real, but it turns out that post-credit scene that they spoiled actually is real, and it begs a lot of questions. So that's why I want to deal with that in my lengthy review. And then there's another post-credit scene after the end of all the credits, but it doesn't nearly have the same impact. So stay all the way to the end so you can see the whole thing and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Okay? So all in all, and this is just for the live stream, all in all, like I said, I would watch this movie again. You have to understand what it is. And the best book to screen translation is Galactus, even though I know there are complaints about him. The worst screen translation is The Silver Surfer. Can't take her seriously in the slightest. Okay. Of the four, Ben is the worst. Ben is the least like Ben from the comics that we know. But Pascal isn't bad as Reed, but he's still an emasculated Reed. Sue is not like what Sue would have been back in the 60s. And Johnny's pretty much Johnny. It's just nothing is beating you over the head like we're used to. And that's one of the things that I think people like. The last thing I'll say, and then I'm going to go to your comments, is the aesthetic, the look of this movie is a mixed bag. I don't like the retro-futuristic thing, but the lighting, it creates a haze that pushes you out of the movie. So the movie is not immersive. The movie feels like a live-action cartoon. So when you look at the Alba Evans movies, those look like real life. So they pull you in. This movie is not immersive. This movie is definitely something you're looking at almost through like an old school HoloLens. It's a filter on the whole movie. The whole movie's filtered. You can see it even in that shot I have on screen right now. The whole movie's filtered, and the lighting and the filter pushes you out of it. It's not immersive. It's something you're watching happen. You're not on the streets of New York with them. This is an adventure you're watching. So like I said, it has the strengths and the weaknesses of an animated feature or a cartoon or a comic book come to life because it's not immersive at all. I don't like those costumes. I don't like that color combination. I prefer, because what they did was they reversed the colors. So it's supposed to be dark blue and black. So they have a light blue and the white trim. I don't like that. I never liked that. I prefer the other costumes, and I don't like, again, the combination retro-futuristic aesthetic, and I don't like the lighting. All those things combine to push you out of it. It's not immersive. You are not going to feel like you're in the movie with them. You're going to feel like it's something you're watching through a filter. So that kind of is what it is. If that doesn't bother you, it doesn't, but it did bother me because it didn't allow me to fully get into the movie like I wanted to. Okay? All right, so having said all that, that's my live stream review. I'm going to do a formal review where I go into more detail. Right now, I'm going to jump into your comments. Okay, Rock says, I thought the movie was fine, had its issues, but far better than average, and Superman. Yeah, I don't think it was mid. I think Thunderbolts was more mid. People came out of this movie, or at least some of the comments I read, and they said it was mid. I wouldn't say it was mid. I wouldn't say it was peak, like Captain America Winter Soldier, like the first Avengers movie. It's not peak. It's not that. It's not on that level. But it's a little bit above mid. So on a scale of 1 to 10, we can comfortably put it at 6 to 7 range. But it's not peak Marvel. It's not that by any stretch of the imagination. They would have had to change a lot to get it to a Winter Soldier level or to get it to a first Avengers level. Okay. But it is better than Superman. Okay. My dead grandmother is better than Superman. Don't get me started. I despise that movie on every level you can despise a movie. So just to make my position clear, so don't ever expect me to change from that, because I despise that movie and the precedents it sets. So, but it's better than average, yes. Better than Superman, yes. I'm okay to a point pulling from different eras, mainly because this is a movie to me, basically establishing in the MCU rather than a world building route. Okay. They do pull from different eras to get the final product, because this is definitely them in different points in their history. I think Joseph was trying to get the feminists of the world to see the movie. I don't know, maybe they're saving Norman Rad's story for when they get into the main MCU. Maybe they're saving him for that. because because Silver Surfette is completely disposable, just completely disposable. Okay. I thought Ben was pretty good. Yeah, the words could have used word. Evan did a good job, and looks like the look was good, but yeah, the voice always sounds funny coming out of him. But I still didn't like the characterization. He's still much more subdued, and also, like I said, we skipped the anger a bit. We skipped the struggle of Ben Grimm being the thing, and that's one of the core parts of his character. So that's what I would have preferred to see. Johnny never said flame on. I don't think so, unless I missed it, because he flamed on a lot, but I don't remember him saying it. But maybe I need to go back and watch it again, but it wasn't prominent if he did say it. Chickless is still the best interpretation. Yeah, that's very, very true. So Ben has his catchphrase, but it's not something he says with pride or gusto or whatever. It's something he says reluctantly. And Johnny doesn't have his catchphrase at all. I never liked how Johnny was always the comic relief in every adaptation. The Thing is a token rock monster for a reason. He has a great personality. Yeah, I can kind of see that, though, because Johnny was the youngest of the four. Johnny was always portrayed as immature because Johnny was like a teenager when he first got his power. So that doesn't really bother me. One thing I will say, and I'm going to say this in my formal review again, one of the things I did like about this is that it's not snarky. For a long time, I didn't understand what people meant about Joss Whedon humor ruining everything in the MCU, but I get it now. Everything's snarky, everything's quippy, everything sounds like Chloe Sullivan did on Smallville. Tony's snarky, quippy, Hawkeye's snarky, quippy. His wife that's Whedon. This movie is not snarky. Maybe for the first time in a long time, we got a Marvel movie that's not trying so hard to be snarky. We can actually enjoy the film. But the flip of that is there aren't that many memorable lines. There's not many times in this movie where something is said that's going to stick with you past watching it. So there's not really a lot of memorable dialogue. You know, like in Aliens, we're still quoting Aliens. Aliens came out in 86. We're still, game over, man, game over. We're still doing that. Why don't we put her in charge? I affirmative. They mostly come at night, mostly. All that. We're still quoting Aliens. This is not that. So you're not going to walk away with really any memorable or quotey lines. Okay? You can cut Natasha Lyonne's character and not change a thing exactly right. She's also disposable in this film. You just lift her right on out. And nothing would change. So to some extent, you wonder why they put certain characters in. But maybe it's a setup for what they're going to do later. That's entirely possible. Zero rewatchability with Superman FF. I can see again exactly. Those are exactly my sentiments. Those are exactly my thoughts. I don't care if they burned every copy of this movie and it could never be shown of Superman and it could never be shown again on Earth. That would be fine with me. Just in case I haven't been clear as to how much I hate that stupid film. But I can watch FF again. Silver Surfer loans me, and I'll never pay money to see Fantastic Four. Like I said, I completely understand that perspective. I completely understand about how them cutting out Norman Rad and his story and everything his story means and substituting this little girl who, to me, looks like she's in high school. She looks like a chick that's in high school. So I can totally understand that perspective. I really can. So like I said, maybe they're saving Norn for when they get here, maybe. 3 things I give credit to female Silver Surfer. I like her theme song. Her hairstyle is interesting. She's got some nice assets, but overall still unnecessary. Well, none of that did it for me. I'm not saying it's wrong or bad. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, of course. I'm just saying none of that made any difference to me. She's a joke to me. She just looks like some chick who went somewhere and wanted to try a new fashion trend, getting her body coated with silver, because all the kids are doing it. And she sounds like she need to find Lindsay Lohan and Rachel McAdams, Katie and Regina George and hook up with them. That's what she sounded like to me. But that's just me. Silver Surfer was a plot device. Overall, the CGI in the film was in. Yeah, CGI, except for Galactus. That CGI was good. Silver Surfer is a part of this story. So I wouldn't necessarily call the character a plot device in this movie because it's not Norrin. Then I would agree more of a plot device, more of just a catalyst to make things happen, as opposed to an actual character that has a backstory, that there's a reason he's on Earth and a reason that he turns against Galactus and all that. But cutting out Norrin cuts all that out. So I will agree that this version leads more into plot device territory. I herald some stupid dialogue. Okay, Dave, I love that comment. Okay, so she said, I herald Galactus, I herald his coming, I herald your end. But it could be summed up with, I herald some stupid dialogue. That's exactly right. Okay. Aside from a romance that never happens, you can change it to Norrin Red and it kind of be the same. Well, not really. Norrin has more weight as a character. Norrin has a backstory. Norrin has a lot of different things. So maybe the outcome would be the same, but the vibe would be totally different if it was Norrin, like it was supposed to be. Here comes your girlfriend, Johnny, Ben says one time, but it's like, it's just bizarre, really. Okay. Should have done more like the comic where the surfer legit forgets his past life and must learn why sentient life is special. That definitely would have added more weight to the character. Definitely. Hate that Johnny's the one that has to do all the research, shouldn't Reed do all that. I didn't really mind it. In the comics, Reed kind of isolates himself from his family because he so buries himself in his research. He's like, I'll catch up with y'all later, and kind of does what he wants to do. Here, the reason I didn't mind it was because they were more of a team. They had more to do than just powers-related stuff. I actually like that in this film. So Johnny's not just a cut-up. He's a part of doing the research that they need to make the adventure work. I like that. So that's just me. Galactus is awesome in this. I wish he was in more, though. Yeah, but I liked just seeing him as much as we did, because when you see a villain too much, it takes away from some of the mystique. And if you want an example of that these days, it's the Predator. Oh my goodness. I've seen the clips from that new Predator movie where the Predator is actually the protagonist and Elle Fanning is a robot that gets stuck with him or whatever. And it's awful looking. There's nothing in that trailer that would make me want to see that movie, but I knew they were going to do it. Just like they kind of ruined the Borg in Star Trek. A lot of that was Voyager. And some of it was First Contact, even though I know a lot of people don't agree with me on that. They ruined the Borg. The Borg peaked with the best of both worlds, and the Borg peaked with Locutus. Once they introduced the Queen, and once they started using them every third episode, I love 7 of 9, but the impact was they really kind of declawed the Borg. So if we had seen more of Galactus in this film, I feel like that's what would have happened. So I didn't mind him not being in more scenes, to be honest. It added to his awesomeness as far as I'm concerned. I said the same thing I did. Other than that, they got Johnny right. Johnny was pretty close, you know. My favorite part with Galactus is when Johnny lights up a good portion of his body. He doesn't care. That's how you can take him seriously. Yeah, but there's another scene where he does light up his eyes, and that hurts. I like both. Right before Johnny lights him up and Galactus keeps walking because firework, how could fire bother him? But Johnny does light up his eyes in the scene right before that, and it burns. I mean, it comes back, but I did like that. I very much like that part. Johnny learning Zen lobbying is silly, especially when Shala speaks English. Yeah. I don't know if that was trying to build some kind of connection between them or whatever, but that wasn't necessary. Since Ralph Ineson was a Harry Potter, if Alan Rickman was still alive, I think it would have equally been as good as Galactus. Maybe. Alan Rickman, however, I could see more as Red Ghost. He's more the Malkovich type in this context for me. Because Ralph in this movie was just spot on. Galactus being depressed and wanting to quit his silly. I don't particularly agree with that. I understand why that might be off-putting for you, but I could understand somebody being billions of years old and being tired. Now, if he's more maniacal, if he's more tyrannical, if he's more dispassionate, okay, that can work too. But I can buy the weight of all those years and the weight of that existence weighing on it. So that doesn't bother me. His motive, I didn't think was bad. I just didn't think he wanted to retire right away, but he's billions of years old, so it's not right away. The plot, especially the end, was basically Rise of the Silver Surfer movie. Yeah, but it's the same story. Galactus comes to eat the Earth, and it's built on the same story, so there's going to be some similarities there because it's literally the same story. Everything needs to eat, though. I don't think Galactus needing to eat is a burden. Yeah, but it's consuming. It's consuming. It's not regular hunger that comes and goes like we have. It's consuming. Sounds like the perfect setup for a Galactus Snickers commercial. Yeah, there's that. They did it with pizza. Well, you not yourself when you're hungry, grab a Snickers. I can see it. If the hunger is never appeased, then why would he eat? Eating must satisfy his hunger for a time where he would just stop eating and perish in his burden of hunger. But the question is, for how long does it appease it? And also how much? Haven't you ever eaten and you weren't full when you got done, but you just stopped eating because you knew you weren't going to get full, or something was going on to where fullness was not on the table for that meal? Haven't you ever done that? What if that's all the time? So it still doesn't bother me. I wonder if death or eternity would allow Galactus to take his own life. Don't know, though. Maybe. That would have been very weighty for this first film, but maybe. Once again, Galactus is not evil. He's a force of nature that's just on a different level. I prefer that Galactus be purely dispassionate. He's just a god that needs to eat, doesn't consider sending life more important than planets, all that. That's cool. That works too. That definitely works. Because like I said, we're like ants to him. That works. But I didn't mind his characterization. Since they said crime syndicate and name trap wizard, I hope they're setting up the Frightful Four. I would not accept anyone that's not Sandman. Yeah, I hope we see them too. I hope we see all their, because they have such a deep rogues gallery, and I love them. So I hope we see them as well. Malkovich was not in it. He was originally in it. They cut out his scenes. They did mention Red Ghost, but they didn't show him. At least not in the beginning. If they showed him in the middle, it was brief. But he didn't have a presence in the movie, though. I was worried from the prequel comic and cast interviews that Mole Man was going to be a good guy. Thank God it's not what I got. No, he wasn't a good guy, but he wasn't the Mole Man to me. He was more like the Riddler in the Batman. He looked like a bunch of bad fan tropes. He looked like if you put together a bunch of bad fan stereotypes, fanboy tropes, if you're strung together a bunch of bad ones, that's what this Mole Man looked like to me. Not the real Mole Man from the comics. That was just me, but that's what he looked like to me. I wouldn't say Reed is emasculated, but he does look miserable the entire movie. He's emasculated, very much so. It's just not loud. But yes, he does look miserable the entire movie. I will agree with you on that one. He does. From credits to credits, he does look like he doesn't have a happy day, ever. I don't mind the look, but yeah, the lighting was off, very much so. Cool that they got the Roger Corman cast to make cameos, but all I can find is Michael. So I got to go back and get a freeze frame of that so we can look at that. I'll see if I can do that for my formal review. My biggest question with all the villains mentioned is that how are they going to be adapted later on? Will there be sequels with multiple villains? Will they be in the trash? I don't know. It depends on how much mileage they get out of this movie. What's going to happen next, and especially with the way the movie ends, is they're going to hurry up and integrate the Fantastic Four into 616 MCU and hurry up and get them in Avengers Doomsday and hurry up and get them with the Thunderbolts and Avengers and all that. So I don't know, like they did with the Snyderverse Superman, Man of Steel didn't get a proper sequel because it didn't go over like Warner Brothers wanted it to. So they made Batman versus Superman. And then they hurry up and did the Death of Superman and the Dark Knight Returns and made Doomsday out of Zod, and they introduced Wonder Woman, made the Trinity. So they did that. So the answer to this question is, it purely depends on how much mileage they get out of this movie. Because if we see this set of four again in their own adventures, they should take their time and we should get to know the villains. But that's not what's going to happen next. The next time we see them, it's going to be them rushing them into the main Avengers Universe 616 that we've been watching all this time. Was it a cliffhanger with Galactus, or is it all resolved, or does it just set up for Doomsday? Does it set up to reboot the MCU? It's a partial cliffhanger. It's a partial cliffhanger. Is it all resolved? No. Does it set up for Doomsday? Yes, in a certain way. And does it set up to reboot the MCU? No, that's going to happen in Doomsday and Secret Wars. This movie does not do that. I know we thought it would, but it doesn't. You're going to eat a bowl of chow mein and be hungry real soon, I predict. Sparks, yeah. Small detail where Doom never shows up to the UN and was chilling. Yeah, they're in the UN, and there's a flash to Latveria. The Latverian seat is empty. That's significant. That was something for sure. Okay, so I'm going to wrap that up. But thank you to everybody that watched me live. Thank you for all your comments. I really appreciate them. Those of you that are watching this on the replay, leave me some comments below. Let me know what you thought about what I said. Let me know what you thought about the movie. This movie is not going to be nearly as divisive as Superman. It just won't be. It just isn't. Like I said, there are definitely some things you got to get past. And there are definitely some things they didn't do well. And some things they did better than others. But you can at least enjoy it. So this movie is not going to be divisive along the order of Superman. It's not. There's no way. And this movie definitely does have repeat playability, rewatchability. But I don't know if we're going to see any more adventures of just the four by themselves, because Marvel's next move is to hurry up and integrate them into the larger Marvel universe. So we have to see how that pans out. Okay, so thanks so much. Again, let me know in the comments below what you think, and I'll talk to you again soon. Have a great rest of your Friday. DT2 Comics Chat out.